गुड इवनिंग एवरीवन। आज हम यहाँ पे लूजिंग माय मदर टंग यानी अपनी मातृभाषा खोने के बारे में जानेंगे। लेकिन उसके पहले मैं आप सभी को भव्यता फाउंडेशन के बारे में एक छोटा सा वीडियो बताना चाहूंगी। थैंक यू एवरीवन फॉर वाचिंग दिस वीडियो। सो आज के लिए हमारे वक्ता है श्री धनंजय जोशी जी और श्रीमती मीनू गुलाटी जी। सो धनंजय जोशी जी नेशनल डिफेंस एकेडमी यानी राष्ट्रीय रक्षा अकेडमी से ग्रेजुएट हुए हैं। उन्होंने इलेक्ट्रॉनिक्स और टेलीकॉम में एमटेक भी किया है और अंतरराष्ट्रीय संबंधों में एमबीए और एमएससी भी किया है। वे भारतीय नौसेना के कमांडर थे। वे धीरूभाई अंबानी इंटरनेशनल स्कूल मुंबई में 14 साल पढ़ाने का तजुर्बा रखते हैं और वहां पे वे बिजनेस मैनेजमेंट और फिलोसफी पढ़ाते थे। वे नेशनल एजुकेशन पॉलिसी 2020 के लिए फेडरेशन ऑफ इंडियन चेंबर्स ऑफ कॉमर्स एंड इंडस्ट्री टीम के सदस्य हैं। वे इंटरनेशनल बैकलॉरेट जिनेवा के साथ बिजनेस मैनेजमेंट एंड फिलोसफी के लिए वरिष्ठ परीक्षक हैं। वे ऑपरेशन रेड लोटस पुस्तक की राइटिंग टीम में भी थे। अब आपका ज्यादा समय ना लेते हुए मैं श्री धनंजय जोशी जी को बुलाना चाहूंगी और सबसे निवेदन करूंगी कि अपना कैमरा ऑफ रखे और माइक्रोफोन भी म्यूट पे रखे। और अगर आपको कोई भी क्वेश्चन हो तो आप चैट बॉक्स में भेज सकते हैं। हम इस सेशन के बाद एक क्वेश्चन एंड आंसर राउंड भी रखेंगे। सो धनंजय जोशी जी के बाद मीनू गुलाटी जी को बुलाना चाहूंगी एंड देन उसके बाद हम क्वेश्चन एंड आंसर्स राउंड रखेंगे। सो धनंजय जोशी जी मैं आपको बुलाना चाहूंगी।
सभी को नमस्कार। जिस व्यापक रूप से और सकारात्मक कार्य भव्यता फाउंड कर रही है, तो मुझे यहाँ पर आमंत्रित करने के लिए अनेक अनेक धन्यवाद। एंड probably this is the last sentence that I'll speak just to prove a point. And the point is about losing our mother tongue, right? And my mother tongue is Marathi, and I am going to share with you quite a few things. So, therefore, the title of this entire presentation of today is Losing My Mother Tongue. And as a result of losing our mother tongue, what kind of cultural distancing occurs in society today is what we are looking at. So, I'm just trying to connect the cultural distancing aspect with loss of mother tongue. And we'll end this with school education and those kind of things. First, just let me explain to you the flow. How is this going to flow? So let's just have a look at that. So in the flow, yeah. So why is loss of mother tongue such a big deal is what I'm going to talk about first. Why is it such a big deal? The next I'm going to talk about is, yeah, how does losing a language begin? And where does it start? What do schools do about it, or what do they don't do about it? What do most schools do about or don't do about it? What's happening in our homes as a result of this? And how does it play out in university and beyond? When our kids go to universities, especially these days, a lot of children want to go to foreign university in the hope of better education. So how does it play out in university and beyond? So this is going to be the general flow. And we'll end this with saying that what can we as parents do? And then we'll try and connect it to the national education policy. And then Mrs. Meenu Gulati will take us through the national education policy and how does it all flow from there. So can we get started? Right. So now first, before we get started, one of the first things that came to my mind in my experience was one very, very interesting observation made by a very eminent person. That eminent person said, I don't have a problem with any foreign language. I have a problem only if it replaces my language. And this was said by none other than the famous lyricist, Mr. Prasun Joshi. I don't have a problem with any foreign language, French, Spanish, German, whatever, but I have a problem only if it replaces my language. So this is where the problem lies. So let's try and see whether you would agree with this at the end of this presentation or not. But personally, I came across two inflection points. What were those two inflection points is what, while I was teaching, right, can you imagine many of our kids can't read these kind of signboards anymore. Anything that's written in the Devanagari script, some of our children cannot read this anymore. And I'm talking especially about many of our children who live in urban areas. In urban areas, it's not possible for them to read these kind of boards. So can you imagine what kind of, how our children are walking around in the streets of Mumbai or any other place as well? They can't read boards which are written in Devanagari script. This was my first inflection point. The second inflection point was like this. This is when I went to a pretty good restaurant, an Indian restaurant in India, and the waiter there asked me, right, sir, what Indian bread will you have with your meal? And many of you would be nodding your heads in agreement. Yeah, yeah, this has happened to me. Have you noticed, by the way, have you noticed how our waiters in India talk to their customers in English? Right? So my simple point is we got beautiful words for it called a paratha, a naan, or a rumali roti, etc., etc. Why are we even calling it Indian bread? And we are saying Indian bread to Indians in an Indian restaurant in India. So isn't that something that is amazing? That why are we even doing this? I was just wondering that for those of you who have gone to Italy or any part of Europe, suppose you went to an Italian restaurant in Italy, do you think the waiter there is going to ask you, would you like to have some Italian bread? Or would you rather take the names of some of the breads and whatever other dishes that are there? So just a point. So these two are the inflection points, but they have a huge impact. And the impact is something like this. People say that this is a statue of Krishna. Hello, this is not a statue, this is a murti. And there's a world of a difference between a statue and a murti. Similarly, Ganeshji is not elephant god, he is Ganesh. So these kind of ridiculous translations happen when you don't know your language. Right. So therefore I began this journey on how or why is it such a big deal is the journey that I started off with. So my question today is, why is it such a big deal? After all, it's a language, and if it's a language, as long as we communicate the intent, as long as we communicate the meaning, all these things don't matter. But that's not true, right? So what is true then? I'll tell you why is it such a big deal. Now, because in still 99, between say 99 and 1720, that's just in about 20 years, this Catholic priest called Diego de Landa, he was successfully wiped out the entire Mayan script in just 20 years. So do you see that one generation's apathy can completely destroy, finish off a language? So this Catholic priest called Diego de Landa, he in 20 years wiped out the entire Mayan script, burned the books, tortured the natives, as you can see in the picture out there. This was all a part of the Inquisition that happened in Europe, right? And in 20 years, he wiped this out. Not just this. Let me give you a more modern example. The more modern example. Okay, this is the Mayan script, and this Mayan script was rediscovered or redeciphered 260 years later. Almost in the 1980s, this was discovered. The entire Mayan script that was wiped out just in 20 years, 260 years later, this was redeciphered. Right. Let me give you a modern example. This modern example is from Ireland, and some of you might remember the Potato Famine, which took place in Ireland, somewhere in the 1830s, 40s, 1845 to be precise. Now, what happened out there? The Irish language. What did the British do to the Irish language? The entire Irish language was wiped out in the 1840s. There was compulsory English education in schools which were run by Britain. The Irish language is, by the way, very different from the English language. So compulsory English was introduced. The language wiped out. And most important, the Irish language was completely decoupled from social prestige. People did not find it a matter of pride to speak the Irish language again. So do you see the commonalities between India and Ireland? And now what is happening today? This happened in the 1840s. And what's happening today? Just about 30% of the people can speak the Irish language. But thankfully, many people see this as their national identity. I speak my language and that's my national identity, right? And they have a collective sense of pride in all this. So around about the same period in 1885, the same period, let's see what was happening in India. But before we go on what was happening in India at that point in time, you have to know how it was all planned by Macaulay. Now, this Thomas Macaulay caused long-term damage to the Asian system of India. And he says like this, I have traveled across the length and breadth of India. I have not seen one person who is a beggar. Such wealth I've seen in this country, such high moral values, people of such high caliber, that I don't think we'll be able to ever conquer this country unless we break the backbone. And the backbone is spiritual and cultural heritage. And therefore, propose that we replace our old and ancient education system, a culture, for if Indians think that all that is foreign and English is good and greater than their own, they'll lose their self-esteem and then they'll become a truly dominated nation. This is what Macaulay said. And this is what he set out to achieve. Now look at this. Look at the date out there. This is the address that he did to the British Parliament in 1835, on 2nd February 1835. Now, what was happening in India in the 1840s? The Bengal Famine of 1943 had happened that time. But that time, if you look back, the most important thing that was done was in Bengal and Bihar, there were 1,50,748 pathshalas that were shut down at that point in. Printing of Oriental books was banned, and Benting's so-called education policy was there to promote European literature. So this was designed, and in Bengal, all this thing was happening at that point. Look at that figure there on the right of your screen. 1,50,748 pathshalas were shut down in Bengal and Bihar alone during this period. Now that at the bottom you find Benting's British education policy to promote European literature. So what happened as a consequence of that? So all our epics, no, and only Europe literature was taught. So which is the reason why our children are still learning Shakespeare and Macbeth and whatever, Iliad, Odyssey and these kind of things. But none of the other things, epics which belong to our country, are ever taught. Right? So do we want our languages? Do you want our languages to perish? Do we want this to happen to our languages, our scripts now? Especially when we have embedded languages. Because we have languages which are embedded into some things that we love. Our songs, for example. Do you want to lose this? Do you want to lose the language that's embedded into our rituals? Or do we want to do even after our behavior? So, what does language, an embedded language do? It keeps our community intact. It gives us a sense of belonging and it gives us an identity. Most importantly, it gives us an identity. So let's take stock. So let's take stock of, let's do now that we are in 2020, let's do a India 2020 kind of fact check. Where do we stand today about as far as language is concerned? Let's have a look at this. So if you look at this, what have we lost? What's not available today? What's already lost is days of the week. Do you find anyone saying सोमवार मंगलवार मैं आपको मंगलवार को मिलने आऊंगा, मैं आपको बुधवार को मिलने आऊंगा? Nobody says that. Even my भाजी वाला से come on, I'll come on, वो बोलता है मैं संडे को आ जाऊंगा मैडम. Right? So The days of the week we already lost. We already lost numbers. No one says Bayasi. Everyone says 82, right? Or names of colors. Forget about names of months. Nobody says Somvar, Mangalwar. Nobody knows the names of our colors. When was the last time someone said कि मैं भूरा रंग का शर्ट पहन के आ रहा हूँ, ब्राउन बोलते हैं, या have you ever said anyone say पीला रंग का अच्छा है, or even pink, gulabi? Or there are so many more colors. So what have we lost? Days of the week gone, numbers gone, names of colors gone, names of month gone. In across most mother tongues, these are gone, right? So this is something that we have to live with, right? So now let's see, where does all this begin? Is my question now. How did all this happen? Where did all this begin? Right? How does this happen? So let's see, what trajectory does all this follow. Now, I think the trajectory starts right from here. When our children are toddlers and we do baby talk with them. But baby talk in English, have you heard that? I mean, the generation I grew up in, right? My parents used to say, "Ale ale, maza raja beta, kai karto hai," etc., etc. But now, baby talk is happening in English. And the question is why? Why is that? And that translates even further later on when the kids become toddlers. Now look at this. A typical park scene, right? A typical scene in the park where children are playing in the park. And have you noticed a strange thing that most moms or dad, whoever is with the kid, are talking to their children in English? The question is, do they do this only publicly? And what is the reason why they do this publicly? Right. And what kind of conversation or what kind of baby talk is happening? Oh, come, 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 or oh, come, come, baby, run, 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 or jump, jump, jump. I mean, is this okay with all of us? Right. So why do Indian moms or dads, parents, talk to their toddlers in English when outdoors? I mean, having traveled to a few other countries, I haven't seen this. I don't think a Polish mother would ever speak children in English, or a French mom or dad in a park with a kid is not going to speak in English. Or take it in any other, Norway, Sweden, they have their own languages. Finland, they have their own languages, so they will speak to their the Chinese, the Japanese, etc. But Indian parents will to their toddlers in English, especially when outdoors. Now, the reasons are for each one of you to look in for yourself. Right? Why do we do this when we are in public? But this is just a point to be noted that our children, right from that age, are being spoken to in English, and they take instructions like this: come, come, say sorry, jump, 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 or things like this. Okay. So now, what happens next after this stage? After next stage, I would say just blame it on the nursery rhymes. And into that bracket, I put that morbid nursery rhymes. Did you know that the nursery rhymes that we are teaching our children today are extremely morbid if you go to the root of these nursery rhymes? For example, let's take some of the most popular, let's take some of the most popular nursery rhymes. For example, Ringa Ringa Roses. Did you know that it was based on the bubonic plague of London of 1665? A rosy rash, Ringa Ringa Roses, right? A rosy rash would come on the kids. And the kids carried those posies, pocket full of posies. They would carry that, right? And Husha, Husha, all fell down. That Husha and all that is the allegory for death, for people who would die that way. So this is what we are talking about. This is your famous Ringa Ringa Roses poem, which we are still teaching in our nursery schools to date, right? Let's look at the next one. The next poem is this: Georgie Porgy pudding in pie. You heard this? He kiss the girls and make them cry, or some such thing. I don't remember this poem. But essentially, it is body shaming that George Five, sorry, George Four. Why? Because he had a 50-inch waist. The notorious woman's and this woman, Maria and Filbert, or whoever, Catholic woman, did not marry, made her cry. are we even teaching these culturally different things and things which actually body shame someone? Is that even cool to do that? To body shame someone like this? And the most importantly, look at this one as well. The most famous of them, Humpty Dumpty. Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. Right? Now Humpty Dumpty had nothing to do with an egg. Right? I bet most of you don't know what that means. Right? It's got nothing to do with an egg. What Humpty Dumpty was actually a huge cannon which was placed on top of the church because Catholic Ireland was fighting with the Protestant England. So Ireland had to be crushed, and Humpty Dumpty was this massive cannon. And when this massive cannon fell down, none of the men could Humpty together again. That is the logic behind it. And why are we even teaching these things to our kids when our poems, and most importantly, look at this one. Many of you are taught this as well. Rain, rain, go away, and all that, right? Whereas in India, we enjoy the rains, we love the rains. And what I have learned as a kid was yere yere pausa. Yere yere pausa tula deto paisa. That is what I have learned. So why are we even teaching our kids this culturally alien, culturally different nursery rhymes? And then we blame, oh, why have our children been suddenly culturally distanced from us? How does it play out? Here is how it starts. This is the way it starts in primary. Right? In primary, this is the way it starts. Then let's see how does it play out in school. Right? So if you're looking at elitist schools, right? In elitist schools, it plays out very differently. In elitist schools, this is what happens. In geography, what I was taught, I went to a missionary school. Right? I was taught about the steppes, the temperate grassland, the prairies. No one taught me the Ganges plains or the alluvial plains or the plateau. Nobody taught me that. What I learned instead is this: steppes, temperate grassland, prairies, the geographical regions of China, US, Canada. And in history, what did I learn? In history, I learned about the French Revolution. I learned about Hitler in Germany, the Cold War. This is actually what's being taught in our more elitist schools today, right? And there's complete culture. So cultural distancing is happening in most of the elitist schools, and and in our national schools, there's cultural distortion happening. There's so many examples of cultural distortion. So I've just put up two. On the left, you will find a class 9 social science book, textbook of Karnataka, and the one on the right is of West Bengal, where it says that Ram in Sanskrit means a wanderer, and its English equivalent is roaming. Hence, Ram is equal to roaming. This is what how history is being distorted for class 6 students. So this is what's happening in our some state books, right? So there's cultural distortion happening. Previously, we saw cultural distancing happening. So now let's look at what happens actually at home now. At home, sorry, let's look at this. How does this start happening? Now, there's compulsory local language education happening only till 4th standard. And if you go to any other elitist schools, right from 5th standard onwards, you are offered a foreign language. So can you imagine our children are learning French or Spanish or German right from 5th standard onwards, right till the time they graduate. So if that is the case, how would you expect them to be culturally connected to our own civilization or to even know more about it or take pride in it? Okay, so this is as far as what is happening in schools. Now let's see what's happening in our homes, right? So this is our cuisine. So my question to you is this: it's wonderful to have all this, but will it essentially one day replace what we eat? And what is its impact on our children, right? So on our children, what is the impact as I see it? The impact is something like this. There's nothing wrong with all this. We don't have a, like I said earlier, I don't have, Mr. Joshi has said this earlier, that I don't have a problem with foreign language. Similarly, I don't have a problem with foreign cuisines as long as it doesn't replace my cuisine. But more important is, what is the impact of all this? The impact of all this becomes that, do you know that our kids do not know the mother tongue names of most of our fruits and vegetables and our grains? Just let this sink in. They don't know that spinach is palak, or chana, chickpeas is chana, or in my mother tongue, pomegranate is called dalim, right? So many children don't know this. Our children have no clue of what the low language names are of our fruits and vegetables. Now that is the impact that I'm talking about. Or let's look at this cultural distancing at our homes. Right. Now, is this? It's great fun to blow away birthday candles and crush the cake of face and throw cakes at each other. It's great fun to do that. But as long as we celebrate this, but what is it being inclusive, or will it one day replace? Like see the picture on the left. That is how my birthday was celebrated. Right. In our culture, is it about blowing away diyas, or is it about lighting diyas? What is our culture? What are we teaching our children? Should they blow out theirs, or should they be lighting theirs? So my question to you is: are you trying to be inclusive here as a parent, or will all these practices one day replace our practices? That's a decision that you as parents need to take, right? Or let's look at something else also. Now let our kids grow up. When our kids grow up, how does cultural distancing happen at home? Initially, they end up watching foreign cartoons in different languages. Then, as children grow up, all that they're watching is Netflix and this. So, this is the kind of impact. So, this is the kind of distancing that's happening. So, all this is happening, and more importantly, is even worse are translations, because translations distort the entire context. Translations alter the meaning. Like I gave you an example earlier when we started, that a murti is way different from statue. A statue is not a murti, but it has been translated. Oh, this is a this is a statue of Lord Ganesh, or this is a statue. No, it's not a statue, it's a murti. A statue is very different. So similarly, translations cause the highest amount of harm because they distort context and they alter meaning. Here are just a few examples. Look at this example. The example is something like this. Arya, for example. The word Arya. The Arya is translated as gentleman or Aryan. It went on to fantastic things like Aryan invasion theory and so many such things. Whereas all that Arya means is something like this. जो श्रेष्ठ स्वभाव का हो, जो परोपकारी हो, सत्य विद्याधि गुणयुक्त में रहने वाले को आर्य कहते हैं. Then it went on to other words like this Varna. Varna got translated as Varna is not caste, or Dharma is not religion. That entire I can give an entire talk on what is the meaning of Dharma or Varna. And the best is this. The best is the word karma. Karma just means inaction. Right? And it got translated as karma, bad karma, good karma, the karmic cycle, and so many other things that it got translated as. So all these translations, do you see that they distort the meaning and they distort the context of whatever we are talking about? So India has got into a lot of trouble because of these bad translations, right? Like Varna as caste and Dharma as religion. Dharma has got nothing to do with religion, right? But we can, but that's a completely different presentation that we can have, right? So what happens as a result of these bad translations or distortions and or change in context? The change in context is then it becomes like this: that when I was in school, I was told that the Iliad and there's another one, I think, yeah, the Iliad and Odyssey, yeah, were the greatest epics ever written. And how many lines did it have? They had a grand 15,695 lines. No one ever told me in school that the Mahabharata is 7 times Iliad and Odyssey put together. No one told me this. This I discovered when I grew up much later in life. So this is the kind of cultural distancing that happens. You believe that something else is fantastic, is great and better than yours. And remember, go back to what I said about Thomas Macaulay, that everything, they will lose esteem in everything that is Indian if we destroy their education system. In 1835, Macaulay said this. So has he been successful is what we need to see. Right. Now let's look at this. Every kid, every parent today is dreaming of this. Life in university and beyond. Right? International students, just in US universities alone, they bring in $37 billion. $37 billion are spent in US alone because of international students. And remember, I think 80% of the students are Indian and Chinese students in American universities. So what happens? Now again, nothing wrong with foreign education, but how does it impact on what happens beyond this? What kind of, we are speaking only in the context of mother tongue and the cultural distancing that occurs as a consequence. So if you're looking at that, what happens is at the end of US education, what happens is people want to, they say yes to foreign corporate life, and they say absolute no to family-owned businesses if they have to come back to family-owned businesses. No, 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 we're not coming back here. We would rather work for some company, some startup, some company there, but I won't come back and take over my family's up and running business which financed the education in the first place. Right? So this is something that is happening today. Children do not want to come back to the country and even take over the, nobody is asking them to serve the country. We are saying come back and at least take over your own family businesses. But children, some children do not want to do that. Right? So therefore I found a lovely slide on this. The lovely slide said something like this. Not every place you fit in is where you belong. Right? So now what happens is after our children finish foreign education and come to India, the only thing that's there on their mind is, okay, let's fix India. Everything in India is wrong. Everything in India is backward. Without understanding anything about India, let's fix India. India needs to be fixed. Has to become exactly the way it was in our in the place that I studied in. Right. So let's fix India is what the starting point is. Now, when you talk about fixing India, let's see what happens. Now, cultural distancing happens in most joint families, well-to-do families. It starts off business families. Children want to, they start by saying, I want to start my own business, so I want to split. Or why does so-and-so get more days off than me in a business family? Why can't my holiday budget be more than her holiday budget? Or some such thing. Or he bought that car, why can't I, etc., etc. All these kind of problems start arising in joint business families. So there's an entire destruction and nuclearization of our families. Not just this, it happens. It happens even in our cultural distinction during our marriages. For example, look at both these pictures. Do you want to have something that is only a few selected friends and all that? But do you want to include your full family, friends, business partners? You remember your dad and mom are also involved. It's not our vivaha, not marriage. I like to use the word vivaha. Our vivaha is not just about the girl and boy getting married. But two families coming together, their friends coming together, right? Or the other one is, do you want to have this kind of alcohol-fueled fun, or do you want to have meaningful rituals, which unfortunately nobody pays attention to these days? There's a, the rituals are happening in one corner, and there's alcohol-fueled frenzy that's going on in another corner. So it's a choice that we need to make. So my question to you now is, what can we as parents do? Oh, sorry. One last thing is this, right? The cultural distancing happens like this, that what I have heard recently is many girls want to have what's called a white wedding. You don't want to have dresses. You don't want to dress in the way that's shown on the left. right? But you want to do something like this, right? It's got a white wording inside. I don't know whether it stands for the color of the dress or the race of certain people, right? But this is what we are talking about. So what I'm saying now is, right, the last thing then is, right, oh, I don't believe in all this. All this is something that I don't understand, and I'm an atheist. But fortunately, Sri Krishna even has an answer to this, and Sri Krishna has said this, right? The 12th adhyaya is all about this evam satata yukta ye bhaktan swam paryupasate ye chapyaksharam avyaktam tesham ke yoga vittamaha, right? So this addresses exactly the question of atheism and those kind of things, but that is if people care to read the Bhagavad Gita at all. So I'll leave you with a question that what can we as parents do? So my suggestions are at the moment, right, speak in mother tongue to your children. They will learn enough of English in school, right? Insist on what you feel is right. Don't do what's called apologetic parenting. If you feel something is wrong, just insist that your child does not do it. Insist on what you feel is right. Or you need to tell them storytelling, and that to local storytelling, not Alexa, tell me a story. Because these days I have heard parents doing that as well. Alexa, tell us a story. Right? You need to tell them local stories of local heroes because they are appropriate in the context in which you live. Or read yourself, read and educate yourself about our rituals. Explain to our children, what does this mean? What might a namaste mean? What might lighting a diya mean? So you have to explain, read and educate our children about our rituals. Right? Then talking to grandparents. This is critical. Every day, your children should be talking to their grandparents. If the grandparents live with you, it's phenomenal. If your grandparents are not with you, let them speak with their grandparents. They'll pick up instances from their mother tongue. And one of my students said this when I presented this the last time. Don't raise your kids to be global citizens. They will become global citizens. If you raise them correctly, they will become global citizens. But don't raise them to be global citizens. That means right from third, fourth standard onward, my child must know French or German or whatever. Right? So this is what we can parents as what can we as parents do? This is what came to my mind. I'm sure there must be 10 other things that come to your mind. Right? With this, I would just want to go on to our new education policy before handing over to Mrs. Gulati. I'll just show you two more slides. For example, our new education policy 2020 talks about moving from Gyan. Our education policy is aimed to take children from Gyan to Pragya and from Pragya to Satya. So from knowledge to wisdom and from wisdom to the truth. That is how our education system should be designed to take our children from knowledge to wisdom to truth, from Gyan to Pragya and Pragya to Satya. And in that it says, the preamble to the education policy says that this education policy is not for preparation of life in this world, but it is for realization and liberation of the self. How profound is that? That the whole purpose of education is not preparing you to work or preparing you for life in this world, but it is aimed at realization and liberation of the self. And this is what it talks about. If you look at the one on the right, the figure on the right, the entire blue colored block of 3 plus 2 years, the foundational years, are multi-level play, activity, based learning, etc., all to be done in mother tongue. And the next block, which you see in green, there's the preparatory stage, that means up to about 5th standard. It says play and activity-based, interactive classroom learning. And it says this as well, teaching up to at least 5th standard, grade 5, to be in mother tongue or in the regional language. And no language will be imposed on any student. That's what they're talking about, right? So this is what broadly the entire new education policy in a nutshell aims to deliver. It is to be seen how it is to be implemented. Now, many a times, whenever we talk about education, it's very, very fashionable to talk about the Finland model. Okay, the Finland model works something like this: that in primary education, for example, the Swedish or Finnish language is compulsory, like in Maharashtra, Marathi is compulsory. Then English and German is optional. And since a part of the population has so many immigrants, there are about 50 immigrant languages that are offered in primary education alone. Now, many people say, wow, to that. Look, they're offering 50 languages, 50 immigrant languages are being offered, right? But I would want you to look at these figures. The area of Finland is just equal to that of Maharashtra. And the entire population of Finland is just about 55 lakhs, right? Now, the population of Mumbai alone is 204 lakhs, right? So let that sink in with everyone. This is what you're talking about. So before we start uh, force fitting some alien models onto Indian education system, let's look at these kind of figures as well. Now I would like to stop here myself. I'm stopping here. Right? With this, I have finished. I would like to invite Mrs. Gulati to take us through the new education policy and uh, what she has to say. Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir. And not to interrupt, I would just like to introduce Meenu ji to everyone. So,
Yes.
thank you so much, sir, and welcome, Meenu ji. So, मीनू गुलाटी जी, she has done स्कूली शिक्षा, ग्रामीण और शहरी यूथ डेवलपमेंट, ट्रेनिंग एंड कैपेसिटी बिल्डिंग के क्षेत्र में 25 वर्षों का विविध अनुभव है। उन्होंने आर्मी के एजुकेशन इंस्टीट्यूट में भी पढ़ाया है। वहां स्कूल ड्रॉप आउट युवाओं के लिए इंटीग्रेटेड एजुकेशन और स्किल्स ट्रेनिंग कार्यक्रम से जुड़ी थी, जो उम्मीदवारों की योग्यता की पहचान करने और एकेडमिक विषयों की सही संयोजन के लिए मैपिंग और उनके लिए सही नियुक्ति के अवसर खोजने का काम करते हैं। So not taking much of your time, I would like Meenu ji to take it over. Thank you so much.
बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद प्रेमा। आप सबको मेरी नमस्ते। और मैं भव्यता फाउंडेशन का बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद करना चाहूंगी कि आज इस बहुत ही एक आवश्यक टॉपिक पे हम बात कर रहे हैं, और ये बहुत दिन से आई थिंक हम सबके दिमाग में चल रही है। और अब जब ये न्यू एजुकेशन पॉलिसी आई है तो हमारे दिमाग में और हलचल पैदा कर दी गई है। तो ये बहुत ही अच्छा फोरम है। तो टू बी एबल टू कम आउट, हम लोगों को सबको अपने जो विचार हैं सबके सामने प्रकट करने चाहिए। और जैसा धनंजय जी ने कहा कि व्हाट वी एज पेरेंट्स कैन डू, एंड बिलीव मी, वी एज पेरेंट्स कैन डू अ लॉट। तो मैं शुरुआत करती हूँ कुछ उदाहरणों से जो कि बिल्कुल हमारे अपने साथ ही घटे हुए हैं और सच्चे हैं, एक्चुअल हैं, घर के और स्कूल के दोनों के हैं। एक बार क्या होता है कि दो बच्चे 3 और 4 वर्ष की उनकी आयु, और वो अपनी नानी के घर जाते हैं, और उनकी मम्मी जो है अपनी बहन को लेके मार्केट चली जाती हैं। और जब वो 3 से 4 घंटे बाद वापस आती हैं तो दोनों बच्चे बिलक बिलक कर रो रहे हैं। और वो कहती है कि क्या बात हो गई, ये रो क्यों रहे हैं? तो उनकी नानी भी इतनी परेशान, और देखती हैं कि जो टेबल पर काफी कुछ चीजें बनी हुई हैं बच्चों के पसंद की, हलवा बना है और कुछ मठरी बनी है, और लेकिन बच्चे रो रहे हैं। और बच्चे कह रहे हैं बनाना, और नानी कह रही है पता नहीं क्या बनाना, मैं तो बहुत कुछ बच्चों के लिए बना दिया, लेकिन ये फिर भी कह रहे हैं बनाना। और आप समझ सकते हैं कि वो बच्चे केला मांग रहे थे, और उनकी नानी जो है वो अपने दिल से काफी चीजें उनके लिए बना रही थी। तो ये थी पहली वाक्या था। दूसरा वाक्या, एक 6 साल का बच्चा एक आर्मी स्कूल में अपना एंट्रेंस एग्जामिनेशन के लिए जाता है, और हाँ, सेकेंड क्लास में भी फर्स्ट क्लास में भी एंट्रेंस एग्जामिनेशन हुआ उसका। और एक हिंदी में प्रश्न आया, चित्र पहचानो और लिखो। और वहां पर जो जिस पक्षी का चित्र बना हुआ था वो उस बच्चे ने पढ़ रखा था, लेकिन क्योंकि हमने कितनी अच्छी तरह देखा अभी पिछली प्रेजेंटेशन में कि हम लोग बहुत कोशिश करते हैं, बच्चों को चिड़ियाघर ले जाते हैं तो क्या कहते हैं हम लोग, अरे स्पैरो, पिजन, पैरट, डक, तो वो बच्चे को वही याद था, वो हिंदी वाले तो याद ही नहीं थे उसको, और वो बच्चा लिख के आ गया ड और क डक। तीसरा वाक्य, बहुत साल पहले मैंने एनसीईआरटी में एक वर्कशॉप अटेंड करी और वहां पर जो है एजुकेशन ऑफिसर बता रही थी एक वाक्य कि वो एक किसी छोटे से कस्बे में गई और वहां पर उनकी इंस्पेक्शन थी और जुलाई का महीना था, बच्चे अभी अभी अपनी गर्मी की छुट्टियों से वापस आए थे और बच्चों से कहा गया कि आप जो है अपनी सहेली को, अपने मित्र को पत्र लिखिए कि आपने अपनी गर्मी की छुट्टियां कैसे मनाई। और वो देखती है कि एक बच्ची एकदम बैठी है, कुछ लिख नहीं रही है, जबकि उनकी अध्यापिका ने बोर्ड पर लिख दिया कि ऐसे लिखना है, पहले ये लिखो मेरी प्यारी सहेली, नाम लिखो, मेरे प्यारे मित्र नाम लिखो, और फिर लिखो कि क्या किया, कहाँ गए आप, नानी के घर गए या कहीं और घूमने गए या आपने घर में ही बिताए, क्या क्या किया आपने। तो देखिए वो लड़की कुछ नहीं लिख रही है और 2-3 बार टीचर ने पूछा और वो बहुत सोचों में पड़ी है। तो थोड़ी देर में क्या होता है कि ये एजुकेशन ऑफिसर खुद जाती हैं उनके पास और कहती है बेटा क्या तकलीफ है, कोई कोई तकलीफ है तो मुझे बताओ, आप डरो नहीं हमसे और बताओ क्या हुआ है। तो कहती है मैडम मुझे ये समझ में नहीं आ रहा है कि मैं घर वाले चिट्ठी लिखूं या स्कूल वाला पत्र लिखूं। सो डू यू सी अ डिस्कनेक्ट हियर? There is a disconnect between what we are learning as a formal language and what we speak at home. And so where are we heading? Of course, definitely in the right direction. Now with the new National Education Policy 2020 coming in and being implemented correctly and effectively and completely, these are very, very important words. We have definitely a lot to achieve in the holistic development of our children with a strong foundation. And a strong foundation is very, very important. So we have to see what they have to learn, how they have to learn, and what is their medium of instruction. And as I said before, parents have a crucial role to play. The education system includes the parents. I'll again take you back to another instance is that a very, very posh colony of Delhi, South Delhi, a very good school. एक बार वहां पर हम लोग स्कूल होम इंटरैक्शंस के ऊपर एक वर्कशॉप ले रहे थे एंड कि किस तरह से हम लोगों को पेरेंट्स के साथ उनको कैसे इनकरेज करना है. And one teacher, she got up, I was doing it for pre-primary and primary sections, teachers of pre-primary and primary sections. And she said, ma'am, do you know that we used to be a no homework school? And after about a couple of years, because of the pressure of the parents, we had to, transform into a homework school. We believed in not giving any homework. But अभी क्या आदत होती है हमारी, घर जैसे ही बच्चा बस से उतरा भी नहीं, उसका बैग पकड़ा और इंस्टेड ऑफ लिसनिंग टू द चाइल्ड कि वो क्या बताना चाह रहा है, क्लास में क्या हुआ, what was the behavior of his friends, किसी ने क्या कहा, उसने कैसा फील किया, उसने खाना खाया या नहीं, उसे क्या पसंद था, उसका दिन कैसा बीता. तो पहली चीज क्या होती है, निकाली डायरी, अच्छा बताओ आज होमवर्क क्या मिला है. एंड बिकॉज वहां होमवर्क नहीं मिल रहा था, द पेरेंट्स वर गेटिंग वेरी परप्लेक्स्ड कि होमवर्क क्यों नहीं मिल रहा है. So, my point of mentioning this is that we have a lot to say and we have a lot to do when we are looking at the education of our own children. We cannot say that we are handicapped. So let's look at the education policy. I just want to pick up some points from the document. It's a very long document, very well structured document. It has kind of included everything that I think should be implemented. So let us understand why the instruction on mother tongue would be so essential and apt. In the very first para of the introduction, it says providing universal access to quality education is the key to India's continued ascent in terms of economic growth, social justice, equality, scientific advancement, national integration, and cultural preservation. The best way forward for developing and maximizing our country's rich talents and resources for the good of the individual, the society, the country, and the world. So we see how we are moving from the individual to the world. So we are looking at the world. We should not looking at the individual and not the world. I'm jumping to page number 6 of the policy document, where it says the vision of this policy. This national education policy envisions an education system rooted in Indian ethos that contributes directly to transforming India, that is Bharat, sustainably into an equitable and vibrant knowledge society. The policy envisages that the curriculum and pedagogy of our institutions must develop among the students a deep sense of respect towards what? The fundamental duties, constitutional values, bonding with one's country, and a conscious awareness of one's roles and responsibilities in a changing world. So it's actually preparing the individual. The vision of this policy is to instill among the learners a deep-rooted pride in being Indian. So please keep thinking how the mother tongue is important, not only in thought but also in spirit, intellect, and deeds, as well as to develop knowledge, skills, values, and dispositions that support responsible commitment to human rights, sustainable development and living, and global well-being, thereby reflecting a truly global citizen. So actually we will be turning, as Dhananjay ji said, okay, we will be moving towards, we don't have to make that effort to bring in all the culture of other countries into our own system. And please, while I'm reading these, keep in mind, keep thinking that how this mother tongue fits in, or is it all encompassing? That we have to decide. Coming back to the introduction, it says that with the quickly changing employment landscape and global ecosystem, it becomes increasingly critical that children not only learn, but more importantly, learn how to learn. So, the education has to move towards less content, more towards learning to think critically, solve problems, how to be creative, multidisciplinary. So what we're looking at as a pedagogy which has to evolve to make education more experiential, holistic, and learner-centered, discussion-based. Discussion-based. How? In what medium? Flexible and enjoyable. This is very important. Enjoyable, then only the learning happens. Education must build character, enable learners to be ethical, rational, compassionate, and caring, while at the same time prepare them for gainful, fulfilling employment. Now, please, I would also like you to consider one question. We're looking for gainful employment, and how we are saying that, English is not necessary, where we know that when we had this globalization and privatization and liberalization, English has actually made, taken India to another level. Please keep this question. We will definitely talk about it at the end. Then we're also talking about that, that this policy should, help in evolving an individual through critical thinking and problem solving, and also social, ethical, emotional capacities and disposition. So let's recognize the enabling function of the mother tongue. Every time I'm coming back to that point, because we must understand that what is going to help, because now the policy is very clearly setting out systems to enable us to teach in mother tongue.
Yeah, just to interrupt here, sorry, Meenu.
Yeah.
When you were speaking about this critical thinking skills and those and analytical skills and other things. See, when the focus of the child is not on the language, it's only then that it's possible for them to get into critical thinking. What is happening with our 3-year-olds, 5-year-olds, 7-year-olds is they are rote learning things which they don't understand a word of. For example, pocket of posies, husha, husha, all fall down. They don't understand anything of what it means.
Yes.
They just rote learning. So every parent has to think, what are they encouraging? Are they encouraging analytical and critical thinking, or are they encouraging rote learning? Because the first instinct is to learn it, not understand it.
True.
So probably what mother tongue promotes is understanding and not rote learning.
True. So the everything happens so naturally. So because the language the child is already comfortable with. So what we do, instead of increasing the language skills in that particular language, we bring in another new language, and the child is completely confused. That is what I feel. And I think in that whole process, ना तो वो इंग्लिश पढ़ पाते हैं ठीक से, ना हिंदी पढ़ पाते हैं. So learning and what we're talking about is learning has to become a joy. It doesn't have to become so stressful, and it has become very, very stressful. I see mothers of children who are class KG and class 1, they're so perturbed. Oh my God, I am just not available. Why? What happened? I mean, it happened with me. Somebody said, I'm going to be just not socializing for the next 1 month. My son has exams. So I was wondering, I said 10th or 12th? Says no, upper KG. So I was actually pretty shocked that this is the kind of stress that the mother is taking. So what is happening to the child? Because the child has to learn languages, the child has to learn mathematics and so on. So going back to the policy, and when we're talking about some principles, I've just taken a few because I think the entire policy document I was reading from the perspective of the mother tongue, and it made so much sense to me that yes, we just need to introduce that concept, and I'm very, very sure, very confident that our children will do much better, and it will not be such a big deal actually. So we're talking of flexibility. The learners have the ability to choose their learning trajectories and programs, and thereby choose their own path. No hard separation between arts and science. So what they are learning at home, what they are doing at school, everything is completely, it's a very free flowing and multidisciplinary and a holistic education across the sciences, social sciences. So we are trying to bring in a multidisciplinary world open to the child. And there's a point in the policy which says that we will enable children to think and speak about subjects like science and maths in their mother tongue, because we have never done that. I have learned though all my education has been in English, and I have worked in English medium schools, and I have everywhere we have used English, except when we used to go to the rural programs where we were actually doing very, very specific to the not education based. We were always using English. But even today, I cannot think in English. I have to, when I'm thinking in my mother tongue. So that's the difference. Also, Dhananjay ji has already talked about it, that we will be, the policy says that wherever possible, the medium of instruction until at least grade 5, but preferably till class 8 and beyond, should be in the home language. I would like to wherever possible. Remove this phrase wherever possible. I would really like to say that let's get started. It's high time we need to get back to our language and make it so simple and make it so comfortable. And especially so because now the policy says that we have to have a project, Languages of India. We have to have another project which is called Ek Bharat Shresth Bharat, where I would really urge everyone to go to that particular website, and वहाँ पर एक प्रण लेना होता है कि हम इस साल में इतनी भारत की ऐतिहासिक जगहों को हम घूमेंगे जाके. So I went and took that pledge. So I think this is very important, that at every point of the policy, it is actually hidden in between the lines that yes, we need to get back. We need to get back to it. So I just want to now take up how we all know it. We all know it, how we learn the language. And actually it is effortless when we're learning our own language. So, but thinking in terms of how we would be enabling a child to learn English, which is a foreign language, for an Indian home, and a mother tongue language. What is that? So a language is learned by first listening and then imitating to speak. And gradually the vocabulary is moving from articles at home to the close to home environment. And then the child enters school, simple words to complex when the formal learning begins. And this is followed by reading and writing. So what happens? We say, okay, bring in a learning environment. Learning environment is very much there. It's very natural while the child is learning mother tongue. The gap between the school and the home learning is minimal. So everything around becomes a learning aids. Since the grandparents and parents are contributing to making that environment so much language rich. So bedtime stories reach the classroom, and every situation around the child becomes a classroom. So students become actively involved in their own learning, and language is used as a medium of instruction to enable learn other subjects effectively. That is what Dhananjay was saying, that we are not struggling with the alphabets of another language. We are not struggling with so many languages at a time. And I think if our children are learning only one language, they know it. Dadi and Nani can so wonderfully teach them, tell them stories. And it would be really a very favorable situation, environment created for that child. And all the other things will not happen. And we hope that the presentation which you showed before this becomes invalid. That's what we are looking for, that this is really not required. So as we said that some questions, how can we encourage free thinking and lively conversations at home? I remember as a child, my mother always said, why don't you speak in English? She wanted all of us to be fluent in English because that was a need of the hour. And I think, but it went too far, and now we want to bring back our own language. How can we encourage conversations that bring out emotions? How can we enable this entire process of learning so joyful that our children learn to learn? And we parents will enable the effective implementation of the language aspect of the policy. That will definitely go a long way in deciding the holistic development of the future generations and preserve our culture. This is my question. And if you remember, I said that there was one question, we're talking of gainful employment and how do we, English language learning has been given such an importance. I myself, when we have worked in the corporate and with various programs, we have created programs for English. We are trying and going into the villages and teaching them English, which is actually not required. They can learn English from class 6 or class 8, whatever is available. My father, he's watching this presentation today, and he was born in Pakistan, and he says we had just one book which on one side had the tables and the other side was all the Urdu alphabets. So he learned English so well. He learned it, I think, from his class 6, and he can converse so well. So there is no problem. We don't need to teach them right from class 1 or nursery. So I will leave you with this. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm sure like people like they got a lot of knowledge by this. And thank you so much for sharing this policy with us. And now I would like to take the question and answers that people have asked a lot of questions. So I would like to take it one by one. So the first question is, according to you, how will the private institutions react based on this national policy?
See, I think here today, whatever I have shared are my views based on the experience in the field and how they will view, because I was going through the earlier policy also, which says that yes, they had put this point of mother tongue, but it has not been implemented. So I think what they should do is more important. They definitely should implement this.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you. So the second question is, one of our viewers have asked that his observation that young parents these days do talk with their children in English because they believe that this way their child will learn speaking fine-tuned English that will help them in their career. So what advice would you like to give them so that their concern is taken care while not losing our own mother tongue?
Yeah, that's what I actually just said, that what I've shared my example of my father. I think we all can. So once we're equipped with our rich language of our own land, we are so much better prepared that we'll pick up any language. We have seen that we move to other countries and we pick up those languages with no problem. So I think it is important that we yes we are looking at the 3 language formula. So we're not taking them away from the English language. So they will pick up the language with no problem. That's what I feel. It's very easy because once they are very equipped with their own language, with a good vocabulary, picking up any language will not be a problem. That's my feeling.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Yeah, so the next question is, after national policy is implemented, will education happen compulsorily in local language? Like, what will happen to current English medium schools? And what about those whose mother tongue isn't local language? Example, Marathi in Maharashtra.
Hello, can I answer these questions?
Please.
Can you hear? Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
can you hear me?
Sir, you are audible.
Yeah, okay, great. What was the question?
Yeah, so the question was, after,
Uh-huh.
after this policy is implemented, will education
Mhm.
happen compulsorily in local language? Like, what will happen to current English medium schools, and what about those whose mother tongue is in local
No,
language?
no, no, no.
Example, Marathi in Maharashtra.
Yeah. I think I clarified all this. See, people have huge misconceptions about what this policy is not talking about forcing any language upon anybody. So that is the first thing that needs to be removed out of people's mind. The second thing that it talks about is when you are doing play-based activity. If you saw the last slide is interactive, play-based, activity-based education. So here you're doing, say, for example, you're playing in the sand with children or you're doing some clay modeling with children, right? It is best as far as possible to speak to them in their local language. That is all that is said. The operative word here is as far as possible. And what else are we doing? We are trying to only make the child comfortable in that local language. Is what we is what is said in the. So there's no question of any school is shutting down or anything like that. We're just trying to make things comfortable for the from the children's point of view. And this is something which is actually new to India. It is not new to the rest of the world. For example, if you look at the rest of the world, Like, for example, for some time when I was in New Zealand or in Australia, for example, what happens in New Zealand? New Zealand is now rediscovering the Maori language. They want all their children to learn Maori language. It's compulsory. Maori language is compulsory in New Zealand, and they take up English as well. So therefore, if that one language is taught in which the child is comfortable, because in India the problem is very different. We don't have one language. We have tons of languages, popular languages. So it's I mean, understand this, that this policy has been made by experts. This is not made by a government. The government has no role in this. There I was part of this hundreds of meetings that took place by experts to form this entire policy. When everyone in the world speaks about how to make things comfortable for small children, right? So therefore, as far as possible, if, for example, in some part of India, language being spoken is Tamil, so that is what is going to be. Nobody is going to implement Hindi there, or nobody is going to force English out there. So you have to understand that this policy is about local language promotion in the child is comfortable. So where does the child spend most of their energy on? They spend most of their energies on joyfully expressing themselves, like you said, rather than trying to translate in their head what it actually means from English to Tamil, for example, or English to Marathi, for example, right? And then trying to give a response. This is how a child thinks. So when you speak to the child in a foreign language, the first instinct is to translate it. And where is the focus? The focus is on translation, the focus is on language. Is the focus on learning? So that is what the policy is trying to address. Have I answered the question?
Yes, I think you have answered. I have a little question over here, very well explained by you. But my question is that the very focus of this policy is to implement the comfortable language, but the very policy is instill English. Why these policymakers at least didn't prepare the policy in each local regional languages?
Are you talking about the publishing of this policy?
Yeah.
The publishing of this policy is in several languages of the world, as several languages of this country as well. It's available in all regional languages as well. One PDF document was published by the central government. Right. See, now actually, as a educator, it's not my job to defend a government or defend a policy. Right. I'm only trying to simplify things and remove the fears as an educationist, remove the fears amongst in the minds of parents. That is where we are, and we are speaking only in the context of if we lose our mother tongue, what do we lose? So let's broaden the scope of this discussion. That if I'm unable to speak in my mother tongue, what kind of impact will it have on me as a growing up person, on me as to my culture, on me as understanding my traditions? Or is it only about getting a job, getting a job, getting a job? Are we preparing? Is the purpose of education to get a job? Or is the purpose of education little more broader than that? Is what we need to look at.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. And so the next question is like, if primary education will happen in vernacular language, won't make their higher studies difficult for children whenever they have to switch to learning in English medium?
Right. Now this is one question that has been debated for the last 50 years. Right. Now, the easiest way of answering it is something like this. If you look at most of the Indians of my age group, for example, now I am 6, right, of all the people of my age group who are working overseas in the topmost position. For example, if you look at Mr. Sundar Pichai, he studied in India in the vernacular medium. How difficult is it to make a switch to working English? So most of the successful innovators in US or in any part of the world, right, have learned their basic education only in their mother tongues. If you look at any one of the, it's so the focus should I mean, I'm again and again coming back to this concept that the focus, we are talking about third standard, fourth standard children. Just I would request each and every one of you to go back to your days in third and fourth standard. In your days in third, fourth standard, the focus is on enjoying your learning. Is the focus on language? So now, as soon as we turn parents, how has the focus changed? The focus has changed. We are making third and fourth standard children competitive. I mean, they should be enjoying their learning. They should be learning for the sake of learning, understanding concepts, and that switch will happen because as you grow up, you have the mental capacity to absorb more and more different inputs coming into your brain. As long as your mind is comfortable, that is the whole logic. Right? Have I answered the question?
Yes, sir, you have answered the question. Thank you so much, sir.
Yes.
So again, the next
Yes.
question is related to this only. Like we talk about
Okay.
teaching native languages in primary schools, but all the workplaces have English as the common language. So how does
Mhm.
NEP help this?
Yeah. So
So I guess
that's
it has
that's
already, yeah.
Yeah, I think probably I've already answered that question. Now, I several times I ask myself this question that when I've stood for interviews of hiring people in different businesses, because I act as a consultant there as well. Do we hire people for their English language capabilities, or do we hire people for the innovation that they bring to the table? Just answer this one simple question. My simple question to you is that do we hire people for their English speaking ability or for their technical ability or for whatever innovation that they bring to the table? What do we hire people for? You could have someone who is speaking fantastic English, but who has zero inputs to give as far as innovation is concerned in technology or whatever other things. Right? Now, this policy is trying to correct actually a lot of mistakes that could have been done over the last few decades. Example, one of the mistakes that I find is why isn't our higher education available in local languages? Why can't I study engineering in Marathi? Or why can't I study software in Tamil, for example? Right. Now, if you go back to some of the biggest inventors of software or other things of people in the world, they have learned in their own mother tongue and they have just applied it to another language. Technical expertise or whatever other things that come back, it comes much more easily if your foundation is rock solid. And your conceptual foundation can be rock solid only when your focus is on learning the concept rather than learning the language. So that is my humble submission out here.
Yeah,
Right.
so the next question is like,
Yes.
yeah, so how to handle and teach children their native language outside India, like the people who are staying outside India.
Probably outside of India, people are the best at doing it, right? I mean, I have both my sisters working overseas. They make sure that inside of their home, they speak only in Marathi. And every week, every Sunday, I get a call from them where I speak to them only in Marathi. So that is the way I think people abroad, Indians living overseas, are far more conscious of keeping in touch with their roots rather than the people living here. When we people living in India would want our children to learn as many foreign languages as possible, whereas overseas, I think it's exactly the other way around. People want to remain rooted to their culture, and therefore, the first thing that they do is to remain rooted to their language because they find that being rooted to your language is an automatic passport for remaining rooted to your culture. If you lose, so the whole focus of my presentation today was the moment you lose your mother tongue, you lost your identity. First, you lost your identity, and second, you lost your culture. Right. So that's where it counts.
Yes, sir, surely. So the next question is like, when is this policy going to be implemented?
I mean, I'm sure Miss Meenu Gulati can answer that. I think it's already in practice. This policy is
Exactly.
already being, yeah, it's a policy 2020.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's
This
already
policy
in.
immediately to be implemented.
This took about 4 to 5 years of making. There were hundreds of meetings of educational experts at different levels, right? And I was fortunate to be a part of only a few of them. But there are hundreds of meetings that took place. There are 100 educationist experts from India and overseas who got together to understand how with India, with its diversity of languages and cultures and thinking, how can we amalgate all this together to finally make education enjoyable for our children and not just about rote learning. There's a classic sentence in this, that let's make mistakes, but let's make those mistakes in English, right? So do we want that to happen? Let's make those mistakes in English. But one of the experts, Mr. Krishna Kumar, had said this, right? So uh, when the focus is on rote learning and the language, because even today, many of us are listening into all this, right? We are interested in figuring out, oh, that word wrongly, how we pronounce that word wrongly. So it is on the language. The focus is on the language and not the merit of the argument. So translate this back to the school level, right? Is the focus on the language, or is the focus on the joy of learning? And this is what the document aims at, bringing back the joy of learning into childhood.
Uh, One question, till now, we understand that in India, because of Article 30A,
Sorry,
especially,
no, sorry, I don't understand what you're saying. Can you speak a little softly, please? Your mic is distorting as a result.
can you hear me now clearly?
Yes. Perfectly,
Okay.
perfectly. Thank you.
So there is a one question from my side, that we know under Article 30A, in India, any other minorities can imbibe their religious education in their formal schools, in formal minority schools, but we Hindus don't have that rights. So under this NEP, is there any correction to that law, or is there any possibility that we can also equally start our Gurukul system and still have mainstream degrees or mainstream education certifications?
Yeah, I am 100% with you as far as starting the Gurukul system is concerned, but I'm not a legal expert in these things at all. I don't know what Article 30A is about, so I don't think I'm fitted to comment on legalities of the national education policy, because I'm at the end of the day, I'm only a teacher. I'm just an educator, right? So I have no idea about what the legal status of these things is, but I have studied the Gurukul system, and I find tremendous merit in all in that form of education. So if you're talking about this as being an informal education system and how does it dovetail into our formal education system, yes, that is one thing that we can look at. How can all our informal education system, like you took the name of certain minority institutions. Yes, minority institutions have their own system of teaching. Does that integrate into the mainstream later on? Yes, it does integrate later on. But we have to find mechanisms of doing this. At what age, at uh, what location should this be done? This, as a teacher, I can't decide that. And this is something for different governments to decide, right? So I don't understand this legal part of these things at all. All right.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you so much. So the next question is, the language acquisition device theory states that children learn language best until the age of 7. It is actually encouraged that you should expose your child to as many languages as possible at an early age. But we talk about focusing on developing the child's hold on regional language during this stage. Can you explain these conflicting theories?
Yes. Now I can tell you this, that having been in the military, in the defense services, and so has Mrs. Gulati been. We have served in different parts of the country, and everywhere that we went, our children picked up a new language wonderfully. There was no problem. I mean, when we were in Tamil Nadu, my children were speaking fluent Tamil. Right. When I was a child myself, I have stayed in Vijayawada, I have stayed in Tiruchirappalli, I have stayed in Amba. So I know a smattering of each and every one of these languages. So the bottom line of all this is, in your childhood, the more languages that you're exposed to, the more the child's brain development happens. So making our children monolingual is not really a badge of honor. So at the moment, I think what we are tending to is we are making our children monolingual. And being monolingual does not expand their mind. Being multilingual does expand their mind. So that is what most of the theories say, which is why most of the countries abroad, most of the European countries, definitely, where it was, the focus was only on English, they're taking great pains now for their children learn one additional language in addition to English. So learning multiple languages is actually good for brain development, especially in the early years. I think Ms. Gulati might be able to speak more on this.
Yes, definitely. I completely agree with you, Dhananjay, that whatever we are exposed to, we just pick up. So we pick up, what you're talking about your children is the informal environment. So what is it that we are doing with English is that we are, I mean, this is why I think the question was that when we are looking at English being introduced a little later, was that, yes, once we develop a particular, language that we are comfortable in, and then we can pick up anything later on. Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. So the next question is like the viewer understands very much now the need of primary education to be in mother tongue, but how will it be encouraged? Because we see today also there are local language schools, but no one wants to enroll their children in them. Everyone wants to go for English medium schools. So how does this behavior change is expected in parents at large?
Yeah, so see, whenever we talk about education, let's not put this, the entire responsibility is not just the schools. The responsibility for education, part of it is also on the parents. So therefore, if parents are convinced that this is the right path to take, and they start doing it partially, at least speaking to their children at home in their mother tongue, or posing their children to different languages. If you've got Gujarati neighbors, go and talk to your neighbors in Gujarati, or if you've got neighbors of some other language, go and speak to them in that. So if parents understand this and accept it, the job of the teachers become that much more simple. And I personally think you are making your children that much more flexible and expanding their mind. So it has to be first accepted by us as parents. So education is not just about teachers. Education doesn't happen only in the school. Education happens in different kind of environment. Education happens at home. Education happens outside of home. Education is happening all the time. So if that is the case, then let's give our children all kinds of inputs, because in that age group they have the maximum ability to absorb knowledge in different forms and be able to process all this knowledge also which comes to them in different forms and in different languages.
This new policy will be introduced only in public, government schools, or in private as well?
I mean, I'm not aware of this. I think Ms. Minu Gulati should be speaking about this. Where will it be implemented, in public and or in government-run schools, or in private schools as well?
Every school, all the institutions will be implementing this policy. It's uniformly to be implemented by all.
Thank you, ma'am.
Oh, yeah, thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. So the last question for today is, sir, can you put some light on the changes in the teacher training programs, B.Ed, etc., in the new policy for improving the teaching standards?
Right. I think this question, I can see it on my screen as well. I think it's got many subparts to it, Mr. Shashwat Kumar Swen. Right. I think it's got many subparts to it. At this point in time, this education policy, we are talking about a distinction between class, that nursery to class 5. In nursery to class 5, how does the teacher training program change? Is that what your question is? Or are you talking about later on as well? Now, if you're looking at training programs, initially, if you're looking at, of course, it will impact, because Ms. Minu just spoke about a multidisciplinary approach. You are interconnecting different subjects. So a mathematics teacher cannot teach mathematics in isolation. The mathematics of it has to be connected to something else. The science has to be connected to something else. Science can be connected to history, history can be connected to mathematics, mathematics can be connected. So you have a multidisciplinary approach in this. So definitely there will be a need to change the teacher training programs to make sure that this element of an interdisciplinary, because this approach of interdisciplinary training is not new in the international curriculum. Because I've been personally teaching this for the last 15 years, 17 years now, right? So interdisciplinary approach is something that the international curriculum already follows, right? So we will have to get this, because we have to understand as teachers that physics cannot be taught in a watertight compartment. Physics is connected to, say, literature, right? Or literature is connected to history. How do you make those connections? How do you make the child think laterally? This is called lateral thinking, and making those connections to different things. For example, there was a teacher who beautifully related music with mathematics. Because there is a connection between our rags, there is a connection between the notes that we play on the flute or on the tabla, and connecting it to mathematics, because it follows a pattern. There is a, I'm not an expert using, but what I remember is that there is a trital and a drut and a slow or whatever. I forget the meaning. I'm sorry about that. But it can be beautifully connected to sequences in mathematics. So who will open a child's mind to all this? That there is a connection between music and maths as well. So what is interdisciplinary teaching? So therefore, to answer your question, Mr. Shashwat Kumar, of course the teacher training programs will have to be changed, right? Language, and especially what needs to be changed is in the primary years. In the primary years, you're talking about pure interdisciplinary play learning while playing. So how can that be taught in an interdisciplinary way is what is important. So certainly there will be changes to the teacher training programs. I hope I answered your question,
Okay,
Mr.
thank you
Shashwat.
so much. Yes,
Dhananjay,
yes, sir, you did. Yes, sir, Sandeep ji
yeah,
actually wants to ask you one question. So,
Yes.
Sandeep ji, you can ask it.
thank you. Dhananjay ji, one question. This is an
Ji.
extension to the question that you answered earlier regarding your sister's children speaking in Marathi and all. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm just relating a practical problem that we have on the ground. Okay, so I'm sure you will be able to relate it. Now, what
Uh-huh.
happens is I'm basically out of India, as you could understand by now.
Okay. Okay.
So
Yes.
what happens is we do our best attempts, as you rightly said. I would like my son to be connected to the roots, so I teach
Yes.
him local language. I try my best
Yes.
to spend, me
It's
and
a
my
it's
wife, I
a
mean,
it's
yeah,
a
we spend
difficult
time
job.
with them. Yeah, it's a difficult, exactly. So I
Yeah,
mean,
it's a
80% of
difficult
the
job.
time the child is engaged with his friends, his school, his
Yes.
counterparts, where he's always communicating in English. He's still
Absolutely.
5 years old. So I would like to know, I
Yes.
mean, what is the best optimum approach, or is there any like thought process behind it? I mean, are there any classes that perhaps he could enroll, not in, I mean, online classes, of course, it's not physically possible, but at least online
Mhm.
classes or something that we could take advantage of and stuff like that, because it becomes very difficult to spend a lot of time with him. At the
Yeah,
same time,
because
we also don't want to give away that local touch or the connection to the roots that is there. So what are your
yes.
thoughts about?
Yes. Okay. I can only share from personal experience of my sisters. Okay.
Correct.
And that can probably be expanded to other people as well, because different people try different things. I mean, let me give you two examples of this. Right now, one example of this, they said that we have adopted this country. We are green card holders of country X or Y or something. It's best for my child to become a part of that culture, that civilization, that way of growing. So if that is acceptable to you, there's no debate on this. So they have great clarity on it. So I want my children growing up as Australians or New Zealanders or whatever. That's fine. If the way you have made up your mind, let them be whatever. But on the other hand, there will be some parents like you who would say, no, I would want my children to be connected to our own roots. So therefore, there are efforts that need to be made at home, and there are organizations in each and every country. You can enroll our children for what's called, they're called cultural protection foundations. So they will help our children learn our mother tongues, our rituals, or our nudgets about our culture. There are enough of organizations in every country. You would need to find out things that work for you. For example, I'm 100% of the opinion that sometimes or there could be things like, I'll come back to this, but there are things like story clubs, which a group of moms got together in a different country and ran a story club. Now those clubs talked about Indian stories and embedded in the Indian values. The language came in, and a whole lot of things came in that. So that also worked. Or there are a whole lot of organizations. For example, there is this Chinmay Foundation and a few other foundations which worked for my sister. Because going out there, what happened was, as the children grew up, they started teaching other children Hindi or Gujarati or whatever was the language that the parents decided upon, right? And they started teaching younger children. So they started taking pride in learning our own language and teaching it to the younger generations. So as they grew up, this is what happened to them. So there are two possible approaches, like I said. One, you can assimilate entirely in their culture, so that this is my adopted country, this is what my children need to know, and that's the end of the story. On the other end of the story, if you as a parent want that our children must grow up with our kind of values, with our kind of languages, with our kind of they should remain rooted to their culture, then you have to take that much more effort. It's not easy. I can promise you that it's not easy at all. There's a lot of effort that needs to be taken by parents. Right? Otherwise, children lose it very quickly. Children lose the first is language they lose very quickly, and as a result, there's complete disconnect when they come to India. They look Indian. They're Indian in their name and face and other things, but they're complete misfits in the country. When they come to India, and then they keep having a disconnect with the country. So I think you as parents would need to work very hard at it. But I'm glad that you're at least thinking about it, because many parents don't even think about it.
Thank you so much, Dhananjay ji. Appreciate
Thanks,
that.
Sandeep. Thanks, Sandeep.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir. So the last question is the education policy looking at having one board for the entire country?
I didn't understand the question.
Like, is the national policy looking at having one board? That is, we have many boards like CBSE, SSC, IC. So are they looking for having one board for the entire country?
Minu, do you want to answer that?
No, please, I'm not aware of it because
Okay. There's no question of changing the board. There's no question of having a unified board at all. All that it talks, this policy is about implementation at grassroots level, and this policy is about children's learning. So there's no question of the board or exams or any such thing at all. Because all this, remember, the board and exams and other things only come into play in 10th and 12th standard. What we are talking about, the new education policy, that where it's to language is only till grade 5. So you're only talking about class 5. The education should be in mother tongue, preferably only up to class 5. The moment you go on to exam years and 10th, 12th and other thing, that's where the boards kick in. Right? The jurisdiction of the board starts from there. But if you are talking about a unified board, I don't think that has ever been the idea. India has always encouraged multiple kind of boards depending on people's requirements.
So thank you so much, sir and ma'am. Actually, it was a great interactive session and it was very informative as well. Like, I'm sure our audience would have loved it. So now we would like to conclude this session. Thank you so much, everyone.